Congratulations on completing Module 5. The content for this module will focus on bivariate analysis, or correlation between two continuous variables or variables at the interval or ratio level of measurement. As you've probably noticed, this module starts a new journey as you begin to conduct statistical analyses using SPSS. This PowerPoint, as well as the following PowerPoints, will assist you to perform correlation tests using SPSS and to interpret and write your findings using APA style. This PowerPoint is not followed by quiz questions, as I assume you will conduct the calculations as we proceed through the PowerPoint slides. Let's begin. The use of correlation statistics will answer questions such as the one shown on this slide. Is there a relationship between the amount of control people have over their internal states and their levels of perceived stress? The variables for correlation must be continuous or at an interval or ratio level. For this example, the null hypothesis is that there is no relationship between the two variables, or there is no relationship between the amount of control people have over their internal state and the levels of perceived stress. The statistical test that we will examine for bivariate analysis of continuous variables is the measures of association, or Pearson's R, with values that range from -1 to +1, with 0 indicating no relationship. We can also measure the effect size with R². The graph that we can use to examine the relationship between two continuous variables is the scatter plot. As with any statistical test or technique, there are assumptions that we must follow, such as both variables must be continuous, each participant or subject must have a score for x and y, independent observation, no observation of pairs or small groups. For the Pearson R correlation coefficient, scores on each variable should be normally distributed. We can determine this by examining histograms. If scores are not normally distributed, we will use a non-parametric test. Relationship between the two variables should be linear. We can determine this using a scatter plot. Variability in scores for variable x should be similar to all values of variable y. Scatter plots show fairly even cigar shapes along its length. Using SPSS, we can examine the relationship between two variables using a scatter plot. While reading Pallant's textbook, you created a scatter plot using the following steps. We need to inspect the scatter plot for outliers, those nasty values that can seriously influence our analyses and influence the mean. If you identify an outlier and want to find out the ID number of the case, you can use the Data Label Mode icon in the chart editor. Double-click on the chart to activate the chart editor window. Click on the icon that looks a bit like a bullseye and move your cursor to the point in the graph you wish to identify. Click on it once and a number will appear. This ID number is the ID that you gave to the participant's survey, which you can refer to confirm that this value is correct. The distribution of data points can tell you a number of things. If the data points are spread all over the place, this suggests a low correlation. If the data points are neatly arranged in a narrow cigar shape, this suggests quite a strong correlation. Could we draw a straight line through the main cluster of points, or would a curved line better represent the points? If we find a curved line, Pearson's correlation should not be used. What is the shape of the cluster? Is it even from one end to the other? Or does it start to narrow and then get fatter? If this is the case, your data may be violating the assumption of homoscedasticity. Next, we need to determine the direction of the relationship. As the values on the x-axis increase, do the values on the y-axis increase or decrease? Here are the directions for conducting a Pearson's correlation. It might be helpful for you to open your SPSS software using the dataset survey5ed.sav and the variables of perceived control of internal state scale and perceived stress scale, and perform the correlation for these variables to understand the concepts discussed in the PowerPoint. In a previous exercise, you created the total scores for perceived control internal state scale. After conducting the Pearson, you will find two tables in the SPSS output. First, we want to check if we are missing data. Were there several participants that did not complete questions for each variable? We usually select Exclude Case Pairwise when conducting our analyses, as it excludes the participant only if they are missing the data required for the specific analysis, but does not exclude them from all analyses. We can select Missing Value Analysis when we find several missing data and detect patterns within the data that might be of interest. The literature suggests that 20% or less missing data is acceptable. If over 20%, we would want to use data imputation methods. Don't worry, this topic is beyond the scope of this class and will not be covered. Next, we want to determine the direction of the relationship by looking at the value in the cell where the two variables intercept. In this case, it is the right upper cell or the lower left cell. We find a correlation coefficient of negative 0.581, which indicates a negative coefficient indicating that as one variable increases, the other decreases. Next, we want to determine the strength of the relationship. The correlation value is negative 0.581. Remembering the interpretation of our values, 0.581 indicates a large correlation between the two variables. There is one calculation left to do, the coefficient of determination. This coefficient determines how much interception or variance there is between the two variables, or how much variance the dependent variable accounted for by the independent variable. The R value is squared. In this case, we square 0.581 and obtain a value of 0.337. We can round this to 0.34. Now, let's take all this information and write an interpretation of our findings. This is the APA format for reporting correlation coefficients. Strict adherence should be given to the last sentence when reporting your results. Notice that you may round your coefficients to 2 digits to the right of the decimal point.